Okay, hi everybody. Welcome to our presentation on taking an English language curriculum online, a comparative study. This is a study we conducted last year to investigate student perceptions about online learning versus traditional in-class learning. My name is Stephen Asquith and I'm joined here today by Phoebe Lyon and Catherine Jurns.
Hello.
Okay, then let's get started. Okay, so first, just an overview of what we will cover today. First, we're going to look a little bit at the context and the goals of the study, a little bit more of the institution, where the study was located, and also the rationales and the ideas about why we wanted to conduct this study. Secondly, we'll look into the methodology and how we designed something that we hope to give some reliability and some validity to what we learned. Third, we're going to look at course-based results. We're going to look at qualitative results, each based on different courses which focus on speaking or communication skills, reading and writing. After that, we'll go more deeply into the quantitative findings and look at how we analysed the statistics and the data and what they told us about students' perceptions of online learning. And finally, we'll try to make some conclusions about what we've learned and also reflect upon what we can understand from these conclusions in the current environment.
All right, so to tell you a little bit more about where the study was conducted, we're at a university located in Japan, and it's a 4-year university. All of the students at this university are language majors, and prior to this year, when COVID-19 hit us all pretty badly, all of our classes were on site. So the reason why we decided to do this last year, one of the reasons was because the Olympics were supposed to be happening this year, our university was worried about what to do with the shortened semester. It was decided that we'd be running 13 weeks instead of 15 weeks, and running online courses for those 2 missed weeks was one option that we were considering. We also wanted to consider the feasibility of a blended approach. So in situations where either students or teachers might have had difficulties attending and coming to the school, what would be some alternatives that might be possible? And finally, in 2012, Mynard Murphy at the institution conducted a study, and it had shown that students had quite favorable perceptions towards online learning. And so we wanted to follow up with that.
All right, so now I'd like to introduce how we approached doing the study. These online lessons that we conducted were for the 6 core courses of the curriculum of our department, which is the English Language Institution. And these courses focus, or mainly teach, the first 2 years of university. So freshman English and foundational literacies, those both cover, those are both freshman courses, and media English, academic literacies reading, academic literacies writing, and English for international communication, those are second-year courses. And each course focuses on one learning or one language skill over another, so speaking and listening, reading and writing, and that's the 4. So for this project, there were 7 researchers in total covering the 6 core courses, and each researcher taught 2 classes, with one exception where one of the researchers developed a lesson and gave it to a teacher to teach to 2 classes. So there were 14 classes in total that had the online lessons and surveys given after these lessons. And there were 179 respondents to the in-class survey that was conducted, and then 131 respondents to the online survey that was given after the online lesson. So how this was set up to be reliable was that each teacher taught an online lesson and a traditional lesson to 2 sections of each course. And surveys were given after the traditional lesson and the online lesson. But the order of when they were given the survey alternated with the 2 sections. So the first section, which was the control group, was given the survey after the traditional lesson and then given the survey after the online lesson. And the second section, which was the experimental group, was given the survey after the online section and then given the survey after the traditional lesson. The administration for the lessons themselves was basically the same across all 6 courses and all 14 classes. So the students arrived to class in person and then were told to go out into one of the common areas of the university to actually complete the online lesson. And if they were having trouble, they were told to use online methods of communication to communicate with the instructor if they had any problems. And this was done to better simulate what would happen in a class that was fully online.
The goal of the research was to determine what difference, if any, there was in students' perceptions between in-class and online lessons with respect to 3 things. The first one being the language skills used, the second, the amount of interaction between other participants in their class and with themselves and the classroom teacher, and finally, what they perceived in terms of the level of the lesson or materials, the usefulness, the use of technology that they experienced during the lessons, the ease to follow, so whether they could follow the instructions easily, and whether they found it interesting or not. In order to analyze the data, we used IBM's SPSS software, and we conducted independent sample t-tests.
So another significant component to the experiment was the learning management system that we used. We decided to use Canvas for all of the online lessons. But why did we use Canvas? So the first was to experience using an LMS that was new, because within the research group and within the department, some teachers use LMSs, others don't. Many use different LMSs. So we tried to create an experience that would be most like what the teachers would experience if they were, if we were to implement this practice across all instructors this semester for the 13-week semester. And then we also used it to streamline the experience for the students across the board. Again, different LMSs are used, so we wanted to make sure students were experiencing it the same way. Canvas has a lot more customizable options than other LMSs. It's very thorough, and it has a lot of different capabilities. Specifically, it has a lot of capabilities in the free version, which was important to us because we didn't pay for it. And also, it looks really professional compared to some of the others.
Okay, next, we'll move on to talk a little bit about the individual courses. First, we'll look at Freshman English. Freshman English, like the other courses, is a multiliteracies-based course. The reason why it's multiliteracies based is so that students can look at different processes, different skills, and use the various skills while going through thematic units. The online lesson in this case was part of the music unit, the thematic unit, the music unit, as a preparation for an extended interaction. Extended interaction is a long discussion which the students take over around about an hour. In contrast, the traditional lesson is an interactive lesson based upon music and using music for fluency and chunking. Okay, so the unit title was Cultural Impact of Music Videos. This particular, and the focus was on audio-visual analysis of music videos and preparation for the extended interaction. The reason why we chose this particular lesson is that we thought it would be very well suited to the online asynchronous environment, and it required the students to really engage with the medium because it was based upon music videos and having the students interact with music videos. The students watched 3 types of music video and then discussed them asynchronously in a comments thread. The students also watched another 2 videos which had particularly powerful social messages, and this was a preparation for them to have a discussion about social issues and how these can be presented through music videos. The discussion was conducted through a thread. In this, students from 2 separate classes made comments and responded to the feed.
Another one of the courses that we used for this study was one called Foundational Literacies. And it's a reading and writing course taught at the first year level and also at the second year level, but it teaches students the basics in reading and writing. And it follows a genre-based approach. For this particular unit that the study was conducted for, it was based on a recount. For the online lesson, this involved students reading a text and completing grammar exercises to identify key language. So thinking about what tenses were being used, what other language features were coming up, so reported speech and other things like that. In the complementary traditional lesson, students were completing reading comprehension tasks. So with a different text, looking at comprehension of details and main ideas and so on. The focus in this particular online lesson was part of the learning cycle that we followed, and it was the stage that's second, which is the modeling and deconstruction stage. And this involves students identifying structure and functional features of the text, identifying, as I said, the language features like tense and key terminology that was present in that particular text. The reason that that type of lesson was chosen was because it was felt that it was easy to adapt for online or independent learning, reviewing things that students already knew in terms of language features and so on. And also it reviewed the different parts of the learning cycle that students had previously seen in their unit that they'd studied prior to this one. For the online lesson, the first task that students completed was reading a text, and it was a recount based on the teacher's travel experience. And then in the second task, they completed a grammar quiz, and it was to help them identify tense, time words, active and passive voice, sequencing words, first and third person, the use of proper nouns, and how the writer elaborated and shared their own thoughts in that particular recount. And it finished off with a third task, which involved students doing an online discussion. Students shared their opinions about the recount and then responded to other students' opinions. And hopefully the idea was that they would go back and have a written discussion to and fro between different groups of students.
The last course we're going to talk about in this presentation is Academic Literacies Writing. This is a course that focuses on teaching academic writing to second-year English major students. The second semester focuses, the whole semester focuses on developing and writing a research paper. For the online lesson, I chose to do a standalone lesson on paraphrasing, and the traditional lessons surrounding it were nominalization, which was taught beforehand, and structuring a body paragraph, which was taught afterwards. So for the online lesson itself, the focus, as I mentioned, was on paraphrasing. And this was a building block for writing body paragraphs in a research paper by, sort of helping them use support from different resources. The rationale for this focus was it had a flexible administration, like it could stand alone. So whenever this online lesson could be taught, these activities would be able to plug in fairly easily. It was also easy to adapt for online independent learning environment. And while it's introduced in this section, throughout the semester, they have a lot of practice. So there's times where the teacher is able to check to see how well they understand the materials. For the lesson structure itself, the online lesson structure itself, it started with a review. They had previously learned nominalization. So the first activity was them comparing homework that they did to answers and sort of writing a reflection on how they did. Then they needed to go through slides explaining paraphrasing. And then this was followed by a worksheet that had some guided practice, taking them through the steps of paraphrasing a passage. And then that passage was turned into Canvas. So I was able to check that. And then finally, if they had time, they had some chances to do free writing in a journal, which is a regular part of class, and it's something that they do weekly. And then they were given a homework assignment that was another practice of the paraphrasing.
Okay, so some of the things that we noticed when we were observing the students during the online classes were that students, even though they were going out to do the online classes, they frequently sat together in groups and still chose to be together. So they were still engaging in some sort of interaction. Also, student discussion comments tended to be quite detailed and very well thought out. I think they had some of the extra time they had to actually think through and consider the music videos, or to consider what they might write, let them digest the information a little bit more, and so they were able to give more detailed comments. Also, students responded positively to combining the two classes, mixing with their peers from a different group. Yeah. Also, other observations were that the amount of time taken varied considerably between students. In particular, students who were absent the previous class took a lot of time because it could have taken them a little bit longer with the technology or getting orientated at the start of class. There was some difficulty and frustration submitting the practice and the homework assignment. But however, overall, the students enjoyed the novelty and the class, despite having a few misgivings about the online lessons.
Okay, so you're probably all interested now to find out what we found out. What you can see from this chart is, if you look at the highlighted boxes that are in the peachy color, we can see that for the skills such as speaking, reading, and writing, there was definitely statistically significant differences. And that would be what we'd expect, certainly for the differences between the in-class situation and the online one. For the regular classes that we teach here, speaking is definitely a major component, not only in the freshman English class, but also in the academic writing class and the foundational literacies. There's a lot of student-to-student interaction that takes place. What we noticed, though, from these results was, if you look at the blue boxes, there wasn't very much statistical difference between the in-class situation and the online one. You can see that the means varied very little between those two. So what these results indicate is that the in-class condition, in the in-class condition, participants felt like they used their speaking skills more than in the online conditions. And that's something that was not unexpected, but it's something that we certainly want to think about in the future. Also, what should be noted here is that whereas students felt that they typically use their speaking skills more in the in-class condition, we found that students in the study felt that they were using their reading and writing skills more in the online condition than the in-class condition. And that's not to be unexpected, but considering that students do a lot of reading and writing in the classes, probably less expected than the other result. When it came to considering what students perceived in terms of how much they interacted between their classmates, the level of interaction they had between them and also with their teacher, we can see that from these results that it's quite clear that students felt that they interacted more with their peers and their teachers in the in-class conditions than the online conditions. And again, that's not unexpected in the situation, because you noticed from our descriptions of the online lessons that any discussions that students were having were through those discussion boards and they were writing in those. But they felt that that didn't lead to as much interaction as they would be having face-to-face in the classroom. Finally, when students were asked to evaluate how they felt about the different items that we presented them with, things such as the level of the lesson and how useful they thought it would be, or how much technology was being used, or how interesting they found the topics, it was interesting to find that in all of these cases, students thought or had a more positive experience in the in-class conditions. And that was particularly surprising, even with the use of technology. Having chosen an LMS that we thought had a lot of bells and whistles, students still felt that the in-class lessons were better. It's possible that teachers are using a lot of technology in their classes. We use iPads in the classroom, so students aren't missing out on technology. But when you're considering that they're doing an online lesson using technology and using an LMS, it is a little bit surprising that they thought that the in-class condition was better for technology.
Okay, so finally, we just want to look at what we would like you to take home from this presentation. What were our findings? And we found that the language-based interactive classes, speaking and interaction were the noticeable deficits. Really, probably the biggest finding of this this study was the importance of interaction in the classroom and sort of increasing interaction where possible in the online environment. Some classes materials did lend themselves very well to online learning, but others didn't do quite so well. But in particular in the future, for online classes, there's a need to try to use technologies, to try to use tools which can give the students opportunities to interact. Things like Zoom, Flipgrid, Google Classroom, things we're all now becoming far more acquainted with, fill this gap that we found when we were conducting this study. So in the future, even as we move on, perhaps a blended approach is something that we may want to consider continuing in our classes, even if they are classroom-based. Some of our classes may be used online. We may want to use a blended approach, even better, to make a more rounded educational environment for our students. Okay, so we'd like to say thank you all for listening to our presentation. We hope you found it informative, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.